Good evening. Welcome into the what's soon to be rebranded as the Sports Source Digital Network for now, our YouTube channel. John Pennington joined by Bob Hodge, Jimmy Hyams right here. Thank you for coming in. Just wanted to do a special edition, an emergency broadcast, if you will, based off the playoffs scenarios that were the bracket that was unveiled last night, the rankings unveiled last night, and the scenarios and permutations from that. There's a lot to cover, but I want to start with the thing that's causing people the most grief. If they'd only watched the Sports Source Sunday, we did a blind resume test, and we kind of showed that Tennessee and Ohio State were two of the six we put up there. We looked at wins versus top 25 teams. We looked at wins versus teams with winning records, which it just so happens Ward Manuel last night used those exact two parameters when he was asked what's the difference between Alabama and Miami. So for all the people that emailed and said, why didn't you do bowl eligible? Because the committee's not looking at bowl eligible, they're looking at winning records. But I wanted to start with Tennessee, Ohio State, because that's the break right now. Instead of Ohio State coming to Knoxville, if it ended today, Tennessee would be going to Columbus and Ohio State. And people are like, how in the world could this happen? And we got some graphics to put up here on the screen for you. Guys, if you look at this, this is both teams' comparison of their schedule. The orange games over on the anything in red is a loss. You see the neutral side, home and away, but anything in red is a loss. The orange are teams with winning records. The teams with boxes around it are the teams with bowl eligible, 6-6 teams. But you see, just in the start of this, there's one big difference. You played an FCS team. So you could make the case that one leg up is Ohio State played 12 games and you played 11. I mean, that's kind of a big difference there. But you did see their losses, and I read someone today said, a Tennessee fan writing as a media person, wrote that the Michigan loss was as bad a loss as anyone in the field. No, it's not. Michigan's 7-5. That's total spin. Right. You lost to a 6-6 team. And you could say home versus road, but those are comparable in my mind. Losing to a 7-5 at home or losing to a 6-6 on the road, kind of comparable. Anyway, the next graphic here shows you the best wins. I mean, Jimmy, you look at Ohio State. We were talking earlier before we started here. Their two best wins, they're standalone wins. Nobody else has beaten Penn State or Indiana this year.
Those are two top 10 teams in the rankings. And so those two wins are better than any of Tennessee's two wins. Tennessee's marquee win is against Alabama. Their next best wins are Florida and Oklahoma. That's not as good as what Ohio State has accomplished. So from that standpoint, Ohio State gets a big boost over Tennessee based on the biggest wins. So that's not even close.
And Bob, we already talked about worst loss. You look at non-conference record, though. People say, well, Ohio State didn't play anybody. They played Marshall, Western Michigan. Well, this is where you get in trouble when you pick the worst of the worst conferences, which is what Tennessee has. I mean, next year you've got UAB, traditional cellar dweller in their awful conference, and New Mexico State, traditional cellar dweller in their awful conference. Well, Tennessee this year, Kent State, the first team since 2019 to go 0-12. Overall, your non-conference foes, one of them was FCS, so you can't count their record. The other three combined to go 9-27. Ohio State's non-conference foes went 19-17. Marshall was a 9-3 team. Western Michigan 6-6 in the same league that Kent State went 0-12.
Take away the names, and as we did Sunday on the show, you do the blind resume. I don't even think it's remotely close. When you look what Ohio State accomplished versus what Tennessee accomplished, and everybody can sit there and say, well, Indiana, they're not that great. Hey, they were undefeated. They didn't lose another game. You know, Penn State, undefeated, didn't lose another game. So to me, if you just did a blind taste test, which I'm not licking the paper, but if you did that, it's really not close to which of these teams, if it comes down to one hosts and one travels, it's not close. I mean, that's all you got to say. It's not close.
Well, and then you get into the conference records. Ohio State played 9. You played 8. If you tell me you could play a bad conference rival or a bad non-conference team, I think the conference rival is always going to be tougher. I would say that if this were flip-flopped, I would say give the benefit of the doubt to Tennessee, because it's more dangerous to play a bad team that you know and knows you in your own league. Well, they played 9 in the Big Ten. You play 8 in the SEC. But, Jimmy, I know you have something to build off of this. But Tennessee's foes, their overall record in the SEC, those 8 foes went 50-46, 4 games over 500. Ohio State's 9 foes in the Big Ten, 22 games over 500, 65 and 43. So you can say, well, who did the Big Ten play? Look, if you by any metric in terms of strength of schedule, and I know you've got one to throw out here, unfortunately, Ohio State has the better schedule, and that's what it came down to.
Yeah, what I did was I took the SEC wins that you had, because not all conference schedules are the same.
Right.
So I took the SEC wins that Tennessee had, and there were 6, and I took the wins that Texas had against SEC teams, and I only did what the SEC record was of those other teams. Tennessee's 6 wins against SEC teams, those 6 teams had a combined SEC record of 18 and 33. That's not very good. Now, Texas was about as bad. Texas was 18 and 38. That was the SEC record of the teams that they beat in the league. The only one that had a really good record was Alabama, of the opponents that they played. The record was 23 and 17 was the SEC record of the SEC teams they beat. Everybody else was at least 8 games below 500.
Wow. Tennessee winds up, so let's say, all right, you got that. And one of the breakdown that they announced last night, and then they had a teleconference after to try and clarify the thing, teams that aren't playing this weekend are locked in, but only with regards to one another. That doesn't mean Tennessee is locked in and there's no movement. In fact, I went back 2019, I took out 2020 because that was a weird year. 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023. It averages from the last week to the next, from the next to last week to last week, 8 changes in the top 12 every year. So you're probably going to have some changes. And you saw that conference championship game losers typically dropped 3.3 slots after a loss. So Georgia could still, you're not doomed yet. I think you're locked in, but it's not locked in and hammered shut, I guess. So there's still possible that somebody else could fall. But in terms of you jumping Ohio State, that's where you're locked in. Right. It's like anybody that's not playing, Ohio State's always going to be ahead of Tennessee. Notre Dame will always be ahead of Tennessee. Penn State, and we'll get into that, since they've got a game, they're not locked in ahead of Tennessee. That part of it's kind of odd, kind of strange, but you could make the case the 9 slot may be the worst in the whole playoff because you're on the road in the first round, and the second round you get the number 1 team, which right now would be Oregon.
Yeah,
that's brutal.
You'd rather be the 10 seed. I'd rather be the 10 seed than the 9 seed.
I would much rather be the 10 seed. Based on where things are right now, without moving, I think the 10 seed seems to get a break.
Because if you go play the 1 seed, let's say Oregon wins, and we can get into this. There's so many permutations that we're going to cover here. If Oregon wins, the way that works is the second round, the highest seeded team picks the bowl, and there are 4 bowl sites that they can go to. It's Rose, Fiesta, Sugar, and Peach, I believe. So Oregon would choose the Rose Bowl. Now, I think it'd be cool to see Tennessee play in the Rose Bowl. I hate that they didn't get the shot in 2001. But I don't think you want to play Oregon out there. If you're the 7 seed, or the 10 seed, we'll say, 10 seed, worse than the seed you've got, then your second round game would get against, let's say, Texas. Well, that's probably going to be in New Orleans. That's an easier trip for your group and everything. So, and you know, we'll, there's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about. I keep saying that, so we'll just wait. Let me ask you this. There were people that said Ohio State wasn't punished enough. They dropped 4 slots. Now, I read today that Tennessee dropped 5 slots when they lost to Georgia. I thought it was 4. Maybe I was counting it up early this morning. Maybe I counted it wrong. But it was 4 or 5. Georgia dropped from 3 to 12 when they got hammered by Ole Miss, but that was a beating. Indiana dropped from 5 to 10, 5 slots, when Ohio State whipped them pretty good. Miami dropped 6 spots this past week. It is their second loss in 3 weeks. The lesson there being, you have no idea what they're going to do. I mean, I think if you get hammered, you're going to drop further. If it's a bad loss versus anything within 2 touchdowns. But the idea that Ohio State didn't get punished, you could make a case that some teams did, some teams didn't. I don't know why they did. I don't know why they did. I don't know why they didn't. It's kind of all over the place. I
come back to what happened to Ohio State after they got beat Saturday to what they had done before. Okay, you've got a cachet of things that you did before you lost to Michigan. And that was, I mean, it was a bad loss, no doubt about it. And being at home makes it a little bit worse. But you still have to say, we beat 2 11-win teams before we suffered this loss. and it comes down to the everybody has a bad day. Okay, Ohio State had a bad day, but you can't just throw out, well, they beat 2 11-win teams. When Tennessee lost to Arkansas earlier in the season, they had beaten a 4-win team. I think is what it was, 3-win team, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that had something to do with it.
You also, the 2 wins over Indiana and Penn State. They also came within 1 point of winning at number 1 Oregon, a team that's undefeated.
Yeah.
So they basically have 1 point of loss. They're 2-1 with a 1 point loss against 3 teams that combined to go 34-2, and they handed 2 of those 2 teams the losses. That's
Good
pretty
math.
So, but I guess what I was getting at is, if you're looking at it saying, well, this team dropped, and that I can find an example of something different and something the same. I just have to go back a certain year. Because it's humans doing this and not a computer, it's impossible to say someone was punished too much or punished too much. Because I can find you a case. It's a little like if you want to find a verse in the Bible and use it for something, you can find one. Same kind of thing. If I want to find, well, they did do this to BYU back in 2018.
An eye for an eye.
Yeah, that's it.
So the thing I don't know if they measure. So let's just say a particular team, every opponent on their schedule won that week, went 12-0. Do they say, okay, well, that's actually benefiting them because their strength of schedule, and I know this is a little bit different, but so now Tennessee's win against Florida looks a little bit better now than it did, right?
Should.
Because they have been winning.
Right.
But if just by some fluke that everybody on your schedule happened to win that week, does that go into their evaluation of your strength of schedule? Which I can't quite tell how much value they put into strength of schedule.
Well, exactly. I think, and we've had this point on the Sunday show and the Saturday show a number of times, they really haven't paid much attention to strength of schedule until now that it's, nut cutting time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that on Sunday mornings. But now that it's the key portion of the season and they're trying to put these guys in place, now all of a sudden, when you ask what's the difference between Alabama and Miami, they go to strength of schedule. When you go to what's the difference between Tennessee and Ohio State, strength of schedule. So strength of schedule isn't important until it is.
Yeah. Well, another thing, too, in my opinion about Miami and Alabama, Alabama has 4 really good quality wins, in my opinion. Miami has 2.
Yeah.
And when I say quality win, it's an opponent that won at least 8 games. So Alabama's got 4 of those, and Miami has only 2. And so I think that's a difference. It's hard to really peg something for Miami and say, boy, what a great win that was. So I think that hurts Miami's case a little bit versus Alabama, which has 1 more loss.
Well, once again, you bring in the human element into this. Miami hadn't looked great since the first 4 weeks of the season. I mean, you had a couple of really nifty escapes in there.
They got help against that Virginia Tech game.
That's
I
right.
still don't know about the end of
well,
that.
and-
Does that
and-
play
and-
into
and-
somebody's
and
mind on a committee?
You got out of California with another one
That's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
So how much does, when you're looking back, do those things come into play? And with the human element, we'll never know.
No.
But I'm sitting there looking at one team that, okay, they went out, they won every game relatively comfortably, 10 points, 14 points. And then you come to Miami and say, well, that one came down to the last 30 seconds. That one came down to the last 10 seconds. So does that come into play? We'll never know.
Well, and here's the thing. All it takes is 1. Because you got to commit, what's the committee, 9?
13.
13. All right. Let's say it's 6-6. But
Yeah.
the one who pays attention to that is the one who's the deciding vote. Again, we'll never know. But that person may just be someone who doesn't like Miami.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to get that kind of stuff on there. It's human. I don't know. I don't know what bad blood somebody has against somebody. It could be that they're going, they had that. I thought they got help in that Virginia Tech game, so I'm grading them down. All right, we'll never know. Danny White came out today on 99. We're doing this on Wednesday. This morning he was on with John Wilkerson, Vince Ferrara on Sports Animal, and he said that he would like to see the old BCS system brought back with 16. He said, I'd love to see it go to 16 teams.
Right.
We've got the right teams now. Add a little more to it, get to 16. But bring back the computers to where everybody knows what's going into this, and it's not so subjective. I have no problem getting humans out of it altogether. Make it a computer. Give it a boundary that everybody knows. Once it's to 28 points, It doesn't matter if you beat somebody 56 or 28, it's the same. Okay, all the coaches across the country know that. Strength of schedule, going to be big. Okay, now we all know this. We're all going to schedule accordingly. Instead of having humans, and they act like it's a positive, well, we rotate the committee. That's awful. Because
Like a jury.
yes,
Yeah.
I don't know what this jury's going to do.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can't get any. Well, last year, I mean, like I say, I went back and looked at the 4 previous, not counting 2020, to try and get an idea of what may happen. But because it's a different committee every year, I don't know how much use that is. Kind of gives me a ballpark. Okay, typically 8 teams move in that last week. They drop 3. I don't know if this committee's going to do that.
I would think not only do you need computers, you need multiple computers, and say here's the parameters
which
for
they
computer
used. And,
BCS.
exactly,
Yeah.
and in that way it gives you a better look at it, and we'll probably talk about this later, but even then, I think you're going to have some of the arguments that you're having right now, because you don't want to go with just one person's idea of, okay, I've programmed the computer to take these 20 factors, and well, no, I programmed mine to take in 30 factors.
If everybody signs off on it, though,
Oh, but
that's a trick,
everybody
too, if you can
everybody
get-
signed off on this too. So I mean,
they're all going to bitch no matter
yeah,
what.
exactly.
I mean,
exactly. But we can talk about it, like I said, later. But there's a way just to get all of this stuff settled.
I would want the computers as a guide and not just the whole thing, because I don't know how you can input. It's who puts in the computer, the input in the computer. And is somebody how much importance do you put into a road win against a 500 team versus a home win against a 500? There's just a lot of elements like that I think
Right.
is going to be hard for people to agree upon.
well, and to me, that's why it needs to be a computer programmed. Not well, we're bringing in Jeff Sagarin and we're bringing in this. No, we're going to have our own formula, and here it is. We came up with it. We weighted it. Here it is. And then the downside is everybody in the country will have the formula, and we'll all know before you do your big reveal show who's in there. But they did that anyway. They're doing it now. We're projecting all this stuff.
And the interesting thing about just going computer, what do you do with injuries? So what happened to
Well, Florida State would have
last
been in
year?
last year.
Yes.
That's
Boom.
right.
And SMU this year is undefeated with the quarterback that has been starting for the last, 8 or 9 games. They lost a game without the guy that's a starter now.
Well,
how much credit do you give them for playing this well with a different starting
Well,
quarterback?
and I think, and it's interesting. You and I talked about this last night. SMU, what if they lose on Saturday to Clemson, and everybody says, okay, they'll drop back and they'll knock Alabama out? What happens if their quarterback gets hurt?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, hang on to that. I'll tie that in a second. Hang on one second.
Okay.
I was trying to go through this in order, or else we'll get way off. But
right.
it's in here. It's in here, and it was specifically designed to go to you. Can Tennessee still get a home game? Yeah, I think they can. I just don't think it's likely.
I think it's a long shot.
But Jimmy, what's your thought?
I
How they
think
do
it's
it?
highly unlikely. The only way that would happen to me, and there might be 2 chances, if Oregon beats Penn State 34-7, or if Texas beats Georgia 34-7, if they're routes.
Yep.
If both of those teams lose by a considerable margin. Now, with Georgia, even with an extra loss, if they get blown out, you can say, oh, they didn't look good, so we're going to move them back. They still have the head-to-head win against Tennessee.
Yes. Did they move them
But there's
past that?
But I don't know exactly everything that this committee's going through. So the only way for Tennessee to get in would be for Penn State and Georgia to lose in routes, and then that might open the door for Tennessee.
And Penn State would have to drop. I've got it on my wall over Jimmy's head that we'll show you a little later. Everything's coming a little later.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Penn State would have to drop at least 4 slots.
That's right.
Georgia would only have to drop a couple.
Yeah.
I think the Texas whooping Georgia could help you more, but the problem is Georgia already beat Texas. So how
Right.
much are they going to penalize Georgia? And then what you said, head-to-head is supposedly a big component in this. So if they get there and it's like, okay, let's drop Georgia past 10. Oh, wait, they beat Tennessee. Let's just drop them here. Is it like a Price is Right game where it's bloop, 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 bloop,
Yeah.
bloop, bloop? Oh, well, wait, we stop right there at Tennessee. That would be my fear.
And you know what else Georgia's going to argue? We beat Texas 30-15 at Texas.
Yes, they beat
So,
them already.
okay, we're 1-1 against Texas.
Yes.
So that's going to be their argument. Again, it's going to be very, very hard for Tennessee to wind up being a host.
Yeah.
But I can't rule out the possibility.
And that's where I was going to throw it to you. not about the SMU quarterback, but you brought it up last night. All right,
Carson Beck.
what if Georgia loses and
Georgia loses, Carson Beck gets hurt, who without Carson Beck, we don't know how their offense would be, but we're going to have to assume it wouldn't be as good. Well, last year, Florida State misses the Final Four because their quarterback got hurt.
That's right.
So could you turn around? Is that a part of this? I mean, will the committee look on Saturday and say, well, Georgia beat Tennessee head-to-head, but could they beat Tennessee head-to-head if they don't have Carson Beck playing a great game? We don't know. So to me, that is the other wild card of, okay, the teams, Tennessee and Ohio State aren't going to move relative to each other. But how is Georgia impacted if something like that happens?
So I do think they'll take it into consideration. However, I can't really say the precedent was set last year. You know why? Because there's 6 new committee members.
Yes.
So how do those 6 new committee members, do they view it the same way as last year's committee member? I don't know.
Or did they walk through the door and say, gosh, you all were wrong last year to do that to Florida State, you jerks?
But I do think they would consider it. And actually, I think that if that were to occur, I actually think Tennessee would move ahead of Georgia. But I don't know that.
I think they would too if Beck got hurt. If Georgia loses, Beck or probably just Beck.
Yeah.
But if your quarterback gets hurt, you'd probably drop because it's only a couple of slots.
Yeah.
I don't think Penn State will. I just don't think they'll punish them for losing to the number 1 team in the country.
But
in
their
a
quarterback
championship
gets
game.
hurt.
Well, if their quarterback gets on. Yeah, exactly. Same thing. But I think Georgia.
been that good.
I think if you're a Tennessee fan, though, you got to be hoping it's Texas that whoops up on Georgia. I think that's your best bet to try and get a home game there. But more than likely, Tennessee's either going to be at Ohio State, at Georgia. I mean, it's possible Georgia just drops one, and then instead of going to Columbus, you're going to Athens. I'd rather go to Columbus.
I'd rather go to Columbus.
Matt Haynes of Southeast Termite and Pest Control texted me Sunday. I was laughing about how I know Vol fans are going to be mad at me for saying I'd love to see Tennessee play in the snow. He made a great point. He said, with this Tennessee team, with its run game and defense, might be better in the snow.
Yeah.
You might want to play in the snow.
Well, can they wear like maize and blue helmets?
Yeah.
If they play them?
That's right. That would Ohio State
that would intimidate
puckers
the
up.
Buckeyes.
Well, what about this scenario? Penn State loses, and Georgia wins. Penn State's going to drop. Okay, if you drop Penn State, and we're making a lot of assumptions here, at least I am. If Penn State drops, then you've got head-to-head with Ohio State. Ohio State beat them.
Yeah, I don't think they'll drop behind Ohio State. That's why I think Georgia's your best bet.
But if they got just slaughtered, could they drop below 2 Ohio State? And somebody says, just like we said with Georgia, well, they lost head-to-head, so we'll bump. I mean, is it possible you could end up going to Penn State?
And would they reevaluate Penn State's schedule and say they only have 1 good win? And that was over Illinois?
Yeah, I thought I said that. Yeah, Tennessee could go to Penn State. They could go to Georgia. They could go to Ohio State. I've cut myself off early, I guess. But, yeah, if Penn State drops, Tennessee could go to – those are the 3 that I would think are the ones. I think it's Ohio State as of now,
and out of all
Georgia,
of them,
and Penn State.
Out of all of them, I would rather go anywhere but back to Georgia.
Yeah.
Just simply because I think in some place in the back of Tennessee's mind, that's become kind of like Florida. We don't go there and win.
We've seen that movie.
Yes.
It'll be interesting
And
to see.
don't like the ending.
It'll be interesting to see how much, is there anybody that could jump Tennessee? That's another thing. Let's say SMU just goes and hammers Clemson. Can they move ahead of Tennessee? The answer is they could.
Well, they'll be
they're
they'll be a
automatic.
conference champion.
That's true. They already
yeah.
are. Yeah, but I mean, so in the rankings, it really doesn't matter if they do move up or not.
Right.
The seeding won't matter.
Right.
Is there anybody else? Indiana doesn't play. Boise State's going to be. Well, the Boise State Big 12 thing. The Big 12's that's kind of set though.
Right.
Those teams are so equal. It doesn't matter if one blows the
And
other
they're
one
like
out.
ranked 16 and 17.
Yeah.
So your answer, no, I don't see
No.
anybody moving ahead of Tennessee.
No, and the reason I brought up was I just wanted to throw this in there. The last few years, teams have been bumped out even though they didn't play. And for all the people that say, hey, take care of Alabama. In 2019, Alabama was number 12, didn't play, they got jumped. So they didn't make, and that's back, you weren't in the playoff, but that was the New Year's 6 game, so you lost millions of dollars by getting bumped from that 12 slot. And in 2021, BYU didn't play a game, and they got bumped out. They were number 12, and they got bumped out. So it can happen if somebody jumps in there. In 2022, Penn State fell from number 8 to number 11. They didn't play, but 3 teams jumped them. But I don't see, I'm looking at the wall of your head, I don't see anybody that's going to jump Tennessee. You're right. I mean, SMU could in the rankings, but in the bracket, it's not going to make a difference.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they got the automatic bid.
That's right. They do.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think, that's not going to, they're already there, so it's not going to push anybody down. All right. Let's see. Start times. If the bowls stayed as they had them. We talked about this last night, Bob, and I saw a projection today that had almost exactly what we talked about.
Can I go back to something we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
With Danny White, and I heard that interview with him about the computers. You know what I wanted to know? Does anybody else support that? Does anybody else in the SEC support it? Does Greg Sankey support it? Is he the lone ranger on this? I wish that had been asked, because I'd like to know if he's out there on his own, or 55% of the people in the SEC think they should use some kind of computer. I would be curious to know.
Well, you'd think Sankey would have some pull if he wanted to do it, and if more people in the SEC wanted to do it, you'd get there.
And get the Big Ten on your side.
I think it's good that Danny White's open about this since he won't give us he won't give us an answer on whether or not he wants 8 or 9 games in conference play. Now, here's a question. Let me ask you this. This is off script. Danny White may be able to tell you we wouldn't be in the playoff if we played a harder schedule. We got in the playoff playing these crap teams that you hate, Pennington.
That's exactly the way you said it.
Yeah, he'd say, who's Pennington? He would say, we're putting these bad teams on the schedule and we're in because of it. Or you could look at it and say, it cost you a home game, cost you millions of dollars in a home game because your track record isn't as good as Ohio State's.
Cost your restaurants, cost your hotels.
Did you hear what he said the economic value would be?
No.
He said, we really haven't run it, but it would be in the tens of millions of dollars for the economic impact of hosting a game.
And if you don't get it because of your schedule, okay. Now, do you think this changes his mind about how to schedule? And that's part one. Part two, you look around, it's like, well, the SEC beats each other up. We'll never get in the playoff. Which league's getting a 3-loss team in the playoff as of today? The SEC.
Yeah.
Does that change anybody's mind, or do you still think Danny White's going to say, I don't want to schedule tough teams, and the SEC ADs are going to go, we don't want to beat each other up. We can't give up Mercer and Chattanooga. What do you think?
I think they'd schedule weaker. I don't think they would up their schedule and play stronger opponents. The ones that are already doing it, like Georgia, or at least Alabama went to Wisconsin, right? We didn't know Wisconsin was going to be that good, but you at least went there.
Yes, exactly.
I think they're going to look and say, look at Indiana. Look what they did. They played a weak schedule, and look where they are. I think that would prevail, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to go a little bit the other way, because say Tennessee is the SEC team that's 9-3. Because of what you did, you don't get in because of that weak schedule. But you can still have, I think, a weak schedule, but it be a better weak schedule. Because look at right here, John gave us the sheet, Ohio State, Tennessee's comparison.
Like Marshall, that's your.
Okay, Marshall. Marshall's not a good football team right now. They've in the past they've been, but you could replace Kent State, Akron. Okay, Akron is better than Kent State. I mean, you can still schedule the cupcakey, crappy, horrible teams that you love, but you can schedule better crappy, cupcakey, horrible teams. I mean, what if Tennessee
Less
this year?
awful teams.
Yeah.
Yes.
What if Tennessee this year had Purdue on their schedule? They were awful, worst team in the Big Ten. Okay, does somebody over at Tennessee goes, but they could be good in 3 years? Or do you go out and at least get you a name? And the other thing I would do is take the FCS teams and say, sorry, you're not coming here again. Yeah. No more Martins, no more ETSUs, no more Chattanoogas.
I'm a little different.
Get Middle Tennessee State.
I know I'm different from you guys on this. No. I would just, if I got a choice of playing Kent State or Chattanooga, I'd play Chattanooga. They both suck. So what difference does it make? You're
One's
beating
from
a team
totally
50
different
to
level.
Yeah.
One's not even Division I.
But Kent State's no good, right?
Oh, I wouldn't schedule either, but
I wouldn't either. But
the FCS stuff, I'm sorry. That to me.
See, that's why I disagree with you on that. I don't.
I can't believe that. Wow.
Well, Kent State is awful, and so if I'm gonna, why would you play a team? You just beat them. You beat them worse than you did Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Okay. So and I don't think you should play, but if you're gonna play a sorry team like that, I would play Chattanooga, UT Martin, or ETSU. I would. What good does it do you to play Kent State?
What good does it do you to play Chattanooga?
But you're the same thing. It doesn't do you any good either way. So if I'm doing that, I'm going to keep the money in state. I'm going to pay Chattanooga.
Yeah, everybody, I love it. Here's the other thing
would.
Okay, I believe you. But I will just say this. I know that this state is always looking at how we can create, let's give money to other people and spread the wealth. That's how this state always votes. It's very much a socialist view. How can we help?
Well, why would you play Kent State?
I wouldn't play Kent State, but I would never schedule at high school. What's the difference? Why not schedule halls? You can give money to the local
you're
high
being
school.
silly. Come on.
Chattanooga's just you didn't play FCS schools until 15 years ago. I wasn't being silly. That started just a few years ago. You never played one for decades and decades.
We completely disagree on this. If you're playing a sorry team, I would take the in-state team and give them the money, and I would not bring Kent State in.
But see, here, if I'm going forward with the playoff format we got, I penalize you for that. I penalize a Division I program who thinks you're trying to be in the top 12 in the country for stepping down and playing a team that is not in your league.
Yes.
Period.
North Dakota State's a hell of a lot better than Kent State.
Sure they are.
They're in a lower level.
But they're still not in. They're still not
Let's
in
see
your
Danny White
league.
schedule them, and I'll be okay with it.
Yeah,
You would be okay with that?
I
No.
mean, but here's the deal: he wouldn't schedule them. That's the point.
I know.
If you want to keep the money in state, hey, we got Memphis and we got Middle Tennessee State.
What about
There we're keeping the money in state.
I'm good with that. I'm just saying
What
if you're
about
going to
Harvard?
play, who?
What about Harvard or Yale? Sewanee, they're Division III, aren't they? What about
I'm
Sewanee?
keeping the money in state.
Sewanee's in state.
Huh?
Sewanee's in
No,
state.
Harvard's not.
Harvard's not. I said Sewanee. I'm trying to think of a Division III. Are they still play football at Sewanee?
Yes, they do.
There you go. Why not Sewanee?
Or you can even go.
100%
You can go
disagree with
Division
you.
II and go Carson.
We're not
Newman.
even
Okay,
close.
yeah. What's the difference between Carson and Chattanooga?
Play Carson Newman. I'd rather do that
Okay.
than play Kent State and beat them 71-0.
But see,
What's the
I want to
advantage
see
to
as
that?
somebody who buys
We're off.
season tickets. I want to see all of that go away.
I'm with you.
This is a debate for another day, though.
I'm with you on that. I agree with that.
Well, let us change clothes and we can have that one and
come in
pretend
and
it's
take
a whole different day.
Yeah, but I mean, we're getting off track here. It's about playoffs. To me, I'm surprised by that. Let's see. Penn State. I was going to get to that. I got myself off track when I was talking about snow games the other day. But I did have Penn State as a team you could play. In my opinion, see if you guys agree with this. This is why I think Tennessee fans should be pulling for Texas. The more I look at it, I said I would pull for Georgia. I'm wrong. Pull for Texas to beat the hell out of Georgia for all the reasons we stated. If one of those is going to drop.
Hope Carson Beck gets hurt.
No. I hope Georgia loses badly and they will drop. I don't know that they'll drop behind you due to the head-to-head, but that's your prayer. Pull for Penn State to beat Oregon. Reason being, let's say the Texas-Georgia thing takes care of itself.
Okay.
Georgia drops behind you. So you move up to the 8 seed. You got a home game now. So that's a win. But you're still in that 8-9 game to where you're going to play the number one team in the country. Pull for Penn State to beat Oregon. So you're playing Penn State. I think Penn State jumps Texas in that case. Penn State is number one. Penn State ain't going to pick the Rose Bowl. Penn State is either going to pick Atlanta or New Orleans. Now,
Location.
Where do you think about Penn State in Atlanta? Who's got the home field advantage in that?
It ain't the Nittany Lions.
Oh,
So
I'd
for
say
me, it's-
I'd say Tennessee would have the home field advantage in New Orleans too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but I'm just thinking, gosh, how easy would it be for Atlanta? I think
Oh,
it used to
gosh, yes.
be that Atlanta was your number one alumni chapter in the alumni base. I think. I don't know if that's still true. Maybe Charlotte.
bet it's close.
But it's close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just thinking, if Texas could wallop Georgia, as you said, and they fall behind Tennessee, and if Penn State could beat Oregon, which I don't think is going to happen, I think Oregon's going to boat race them. But if Penn State could beat them, I think the winner of that game is going to be number one. I think the number 3 team with 1 loss is going to jump more from beating the number 1 team with no losses than the number 2 would from putting a 3rd loss on Georgia. So I think Penn State would be number 1, and for them to pick where they want to go, they're not going to pick the Rose Bowl. They're not going to pick the Fiesta Bowl. It's going to come down to they want to play their home game at Sugar or the Peach, and that's better for Tennessee. So there's your best case scenario. Tennessee plays a home game and you play Georgia at home in that scenario. Tennessee would play Georgia at home in the first game, then move on and play Penn State and Atlanta if they won that game at home. That's my best case scenario.
Would Penn State dare say, we don't want to go to Atlanta and give Tennessee, but we'll go to the Fiesta Bowl?
Could be. Maybe
If
they're
we're going
number
to
one.
travel thousands.
Maybe their number one alumni champion is Tempe, Arizona, or Glendale.
But here's the question: when do they get to make that pick? Do they get to wait till after the first round of games is played before they make that pick, or once they're deemed to be number one, do they have to make that pick then?
That's a great question because they could sit and see who.
If you could sit and wait, you're not going to go to Atlanta and maybe play Tennessee. Now you'll go to Atlanta and maybe play Ohio State.
I don't either. I think it's after. I think it's afterward.
That way you wouldn't accidentally put yourself in a road game somewhere. But you would Penn State.
But wouldn't you? I think ticket sales. I mean, 2 weeks versus one. I mean, the tickets are going to sell. I get that. But is it 2 weeks versus one? You don't have a lot of time to market what's happening. I mean, it would almost seem like it's okay. Sunday afternoon, Penn State, you're number one. Where are you going? You know, because I don't think they'll go out to Pasadena. Like John said, it would be New Orleans or Atlanta. But maybe they do get a week to sit back and think about it.
Is there a way?
Are they going to put on a hat like the recruits do on signing day?
Fiesta Bowl.
Fiesta Bowl,
Peach Bowl hat. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about this quickly. The 4 games, if it were lined up as it is today, by what we saw Tuesday, Arizona State at Penn State, Indiana at Georgia, Tennessee at Ohio State, Alabama at Notre Dame are your 4 games. In terms of the time slots, I think Arizona-Penn State is probably Saturday in the afternoon. I don't think they'd make Arizona State play a 9 a.m. West Coast game. So I think that's Saturday afternoon. I think Indiana-Georgia's probably Saturday noon. I think your 2 bigger games get the primetime slots. I think Tennessee-Ohio State Friday. I think the biggest game there is Alabama at Notre Dame, and that's Saturday primetime. I could be wrong, but I looked this morning and saw somebody else make the exact same projection for the exact same reasons. We talked about it last night. I think Tennessee at Ohio State is either getting primetime Friday
or primetime Saturday.
And I think it'll be Alabama Notre Dame probably gets the Saturday slot, but I don't know.
Well, those would get the most eyeballs.
Yeah.
And I think that you'd want the most eyeballs on your primetime slot. Yeah. So, I agree with that.
Okay. What do you say we go to the big wall and look at some chaos scenarios?
We'll go. I'll bring my coffee.
Yeah, bring the coffee. All right, now we're in a different area of our studio. This was never meant to be used as part of our studio, but I came in today. I said, you know what, we can hang stuff on the wall. And by the way, this is Nudura concrete forms. If you ever hear me talk about Nudura, A.G. Hyams Company, these things, you see how hard they are. It's like a Lego block. It's a concrete form. What they do is the form is like the foam, but then they lock them together like Legos. They pour concrete down the middle. This doesn't even have the concrete. Is that sturdy? Pretty sturdy. Yeah, you build a house out of that. A.G. Hyams Company.
Let me throw Jimmy into it, and let's find out.
Big Jimmy shave hole. It'll be bad for Jimmy, good for Nudura. He won't have a problem. All right, we've got our 12 teams as they're ranked right now, and over here we have the teams that can play themselves in through a conference championship win. We've got Arizona State, Iowa State. Since they're going to be seeded the same way, I just put them together. Clemson is number 17. They could get in. 20 is UNLV. They could get in. I'm going to run a scenario here. We're going to move teams around, see what we think would happen. We're just going to call this the full chaos scenario. This is if it all goes to hell on Friday and Saturday. All right, so let's say Oregon loses to Penn State. So Oregon's going to drop.
Okay.
Texas is going to lose to Georgia. Let me get you to step right there. There we go. Texas is going to lose to Georgia. Penn State would move up. Do we think Penn State goes to number 1?
I would think if they beat Oregon, they probably would.
And Texas loses.
Yeah.
So Jimmy, let me get you to put. You can move Penn State up, and we can drop Oregon somewhere else. Actually, let's do this. Put Penn State over there beside of you, just above you.
Oh, put them beside.
That way we can kind of start a new column and just do it that way. It'd be easier. Yeah, there we go. All right. So, what are we doing with Oregon and Texas?
If Oregon loses, I don't think they would fall below Notre Dame. I think they would go to 3.
Okay, so Notre Dame 2, or no, you're saying who?
No, I think Notre Dame would stay 4, Oregon would fall down to number 3.
We've got Texas losing 2, though. So who jumps?
Okay,
Georgia?
Then Georgia jumps up. Okay, gosh.
See,
okay.
I think you're.
This is chaos.
Yes, who's number 2 in this scenario? Does Oregon lose? I mean, does Oregon drop more than a slot? And remember, this is interesting.
I tell you what, I think a 2-loss Georgia team probably moves up to number 2.
Jimmy?
Does it matter about Notre Dame because we know they're not getting an automatic a bye?
Well, we're just looking at the
We're
rankings.
just looking at
then
the
we'll
rankings.
figure out the
Okay.
bracket.
I think Notre Dame goes to 2. I think Georgia goes to 3. And I think, wow.
And who would have thought that when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois?
Yeah, no
Really,
kidding.
who would think it now if they were anybody but Notre Dame? So Georgia, Notre Dame goes to 2.
I think Notre Dame would go to 2 as well. I agree. And then I think Oregon's 3. But Georgia's got to move up more than, It's tough. And this
Well,
is
no,
only-
Georgia could go to 4.
Yeah, but you're only moving
you're
them
only
up one
moving them
slot
up
for
one
beating
slot.
Texas twice.
Then you got to drop Oregon.
Oh,
farther.
now here's one. Let me throw this out there. Okay, this may be a punishment for Notre Dame. One of the other things I noticed in those last 4 brackets when I went back and looked, teams that lost their conference championship game dropped usually 3 slots. Yeah. Teams that won their conference championship game, that's a boost. You typically get a boost. So let's say Georgia does jump Notre Dame.
Okay, so they go to number 2.
And then you got to decide, is Notre Dame or Oregon number 3? Let's go ahead and move Georgia under Penn State there. Thank you, Jimmy.
Under Penn State. All right, leave this one. Leave Texas.
Yep, we'll leave it there for now.
All right.
So who would be the new number 3, Oregon or Notre Dame?
I'm going to go Oregon.
I'm
Okay.
going to go Oregon. They've got 1 loss. It's a lot better loss than what Notre Dame would
They
have.
didn't play in a conference championship
Right.
game. Oregon, yes, you're not going to punish them too much. So,
So
Oregon
put Oregon
3.
at 3.
And then Notre Dame 4. Would we agree with that?
I think so.
Okay, let's put
You
Oregon
wanna
under
move
Georgia.
Oregon down?
Yeah.
See,
Sorry,
I
I shouldn't have put you
Oregon-
on that side. No, you'd be under Georgia. Go ahead. We're starting that other column.
Oh, okay.
So we'll
The
just
other
move
guy.
everything
See,
up.
I think Oregon would only they already beat Ohio State, so that's a big quality win.
Yep.
Where's Notre Dame's big quality wins?
Yeah, I think they'd be behind
I
Oregon.
mean,
so.
A&M is probably their
That is-
best win.
Yeah.
So
And you've got a
the season
terrible
opener.
loss.
Well, they beat
Yeah, you
ranked
did.
teams in Army and Navy. All right, let's
Okay.
put Notre Dame under Oregon.
Okay.
So there's your 1, 2, 3, 4. In this scenario, full chaos scenario, Penn State 1, Georgia 2, Oregon 3, Notre Dame 4. Texas fall any further than 5?
No, I
they
think
fall.
I think a 2-loss Texas would be 5.
Well, but here's the thing. Let's look at this. Remember, Texas strength of schedule, they got
Not good.
nothing compared to Ohio State. Ohio State, in this case, would have a win over the number 1 team in the country. They lost the number 3 team in the country by a point. They'd have a win over Indiana. Texas would only have 2 losses to Georgia out of anybody on this list. I'm not so
Texas'
sure.
best win is over A&M, right?
Yes.
Because Michigan ended up 6-6, right?
Michigan
Right.
ended 7-5.
7-5. Okay. So, but yeah, A&M would be their best win.
Yeah. So I would
Wow.
go. I think Ohio State may jump them.
I would.
Ohio
would
State
jump
over
'em?
Texas.
Yeah, because of what Ohio State's done. I think their resume is better than Texas.
Okay, so Ohio State goes up there next to Penn State. Let's put it over Texas.
Then leave Texas there.
Well, here we go. This is some fun now.
This is chaos.
Texas and Tennessee, they're pretty similar. Texas doesn't have a win as good as Tennessee beating Alabama.
But they also don't have a loss as bad as losing to Arkansas.
And how much do you drop them from number 2?
See, I
for
think
losing
it would
in an
be,
SEC title
it
game?
would be hard to get them. I mean, right now we got them at 6. I think it would be hard for them to fall below
Yeah.
6.
Let's do it this way. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah, I don't think they would fall below. I would keep Texas over Tennessee.
All right.
They also beat Arkansas, right?
Yeah.
Tennessee lost to Arkansas.
Yeah.
That would be another.
Okay, well,
point that's Texas favor.
let's get in the rest of the full chaos here because we're getting down to the back.
Right.
The rest of the full chaos, Clemson beats SMU. So 17 is in the mix. UNLV beats Boise State. They're in the mix. Now, for all the people going, well, Boise State's out.
That's a good question.
Georgia, what do you do? Georgia and Boise State are the same thing. They both beat a team earlier in the year. They're forced to play them in a rematch. Boise State has 1 loss on the year. It was a walk-off field goal to what is currently number 1 Oregon. if they lose to UNLV, they will have 2 losses on the year, both of them to teams in the playoffs, both of them to teams that are ranked, and one of them to a team they already beat earlier in the year. You could make a case. If all fans don't want to hear it, fans anywhere outside of Boise, any big conference doesn't want to hear it, you can make a case that Boise State should stay in. So we're putting Clemson in. They're definitely in. UNLV is definitely in. Right. And let's go ahead. It doesn't matter which of these won.
Right.
So these 3 are in our mix. So all of these is what we're choosing from. These are what we're choosing from. I'm thinking, since the committee's already done it, we can yank them out.
Miami.
I think we can yank Alabama from that scenario. Do you agree?
think you can get rid of Alabama.
I don't know
We're going
about
to hang on to it? Okay, put them over here.
Because now I'm debating Alabama versus Boise State, right?
Okay.
Isn't that a part of the argument?
Yeah. Let's look. Who goes after Texas on this list? If SMU has lost, I think it's Tennessee.
I think Tennessee goes next.
Yes, I go Tennessee.
So Tennessee moves up to number 7 in this scenario. So you got a home game in the full chaos scenario. All right?
I'm kind of liking
Well-
this chaos.
This is fun. Who's number 8? Is it Indiana?
Indiana.
Yeah.
Usurping your role.
I see that.
All right. So we now got who's number 9 on this list? Who are the automatics? These 2 are automatic. They're going somewhere.
I think Clemson will go ahead of UNLV.
I
Do you think this is 11 and 12?
Yes. I think Clemson would go ahead of UNLV.
Okay. So let's what we'll need to do, let's move SMU over here and just put Clemson and UNLV at the bottom. Are we sure about this? Alabama wouldn't be ahead of either of these teams?
Well, now, these teams,
Yeah, they're automatic. They get in.
they're automatic. No, I think that kicks Alabama out because they're in. And Alabama's not going to jump anybody we have over here.
Correct. But I'm saying, would they jump
SMU and Boise State?
Yeah. Could they
Exactly.
still get in here? I mean, if they did, then you could say they're ranked ahead of them. I'm not saying they'll bump, they're in. But I'm
Right.
saying Alabama may be
Well, what I
seated
was-
higher than these. They're ranked higher than they are now.
Just so I don't get confused, let's go ahead and leave our 2 slots.
Okay, that's fine. So it would technically be the other way around, but it doesn't matter.
Right, but I mean
Yeah.
so now we've got 2 slots.
They're automatic too. So
Okay,
this
now
winner
we've got
gets it.
1 slot.
1 slot.
So now it's between Boise State, which just lost, SMU, which just lost, and Alabama.
I think SMU gets it. Now, and I've got to admit, I told you, I have not watched a minute of SMU football
I
this
have.
year. I don't know how good they are. I don't know what their record was, who they play. I know what the record was, but I don't know who they played. But I would assume, since they're saying you're not going to be penalized for your conference
Somebody is.
championship,
Somebody is in this scenario.
but they stay in.
No, what I'm saying, one of those 2 will be. Even if you say that at SMU, Boise State's been penalized. See, that's the problem with them saying we won't penalize you for losing your conference championship game. You may not have a choice. Because I don't think you're keeping Boise State or SMU over Indiana, an 11-1 Big Ten team versus a 10-2 ACC team.
So what you're saying
I don't
is
know.
there's who's out.
No, I don't want my house burned down.
I think Alabama's in and Boise State and SMU are out.
Wow, I would have that. To me is really
And
So only 1 ACC team.
that's what they got right now.
And, wow.
But the Alabama in that scenario,
they're going to have more quality wins than SMU.
yeah,
SMU's strength of schedule is about 67, if I remember correctly. Alabama's is much, much higher.
Right.
Alabama's got 4 quality wins. SMU would have.
well, I mean that's the question. Just by the committee's talk last night, 6 wins versus teams with winning records, 3 wins versus teams in the top 25. That's more than SMU or Boise State. Period.
That's why I think Alabama's in over those 2.
Whoa, boy, that is going to cause
Here's
some
the other,
hell.
here's the
Oh,
other
wow.
thing, and I can't completely dismiss it, although I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. Alabama's got a brand name.
Well,
hate that, but
Boise State and SMU.
but here is the question,
Okay.
and we don't have them here on the board to be able to talk about them. But say that South Carolina instead of Alabama.
And the reason I didn't put them on the board was
I
because
know
the committee's
exactly,
already
because there's too much.
they're already out.
But
Into
say
that
over
game.
here we've got South Carolina and Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the committee's already
So,
ruled
Yeah.
they're out.
But
What's your point, Bob?
My point is, if right now South Carolina was in the Alabama slot, okay, would they still? And then we're saying that Alabama stays
brand
in.
name you talking about?
Does South Carolina stay in, or it's like, oh gosh, no, we'll put SMU right here and be done with it?
I think they would be out because they're already out. I think that's already been answered by the fact the committee's looked at it.
But no, what I'm saying is, give South Carolina
Alabama's
everything
record.
Alabama has. Put them up here.
I still think the SEC team gets the benefit of the doubt. I don't know that it's brand name as much as SEC brand name.
See, I think there's a little bit of brand name that plays into it.
I think it's brand name for SEC.
I think Notre Dame brand name plays into where they have ended up after, one, you lost to a terrible team, and two, your schedule wasn't very good. I think Notre Dame, if you
looked at Notre Dame's strength of schedule.
I mean, it can't be very high. I mean, now you get points for playing an undefeated Army and an undefeated Navy.
You went to Southern Cal and won there. You beat, 4 or 5 ACC teams, I guess?
I think they were in the 40s. I think.
Which is probably higher than.
I should have brought my cheat sheet.
Yeah, I didn't put that. I didn't think.
You want me to go get it? I've got it over there.
Oh, go grab it. Yeah, sure. We don't care. We're YouTube, baby. This isn't TV. We can do whatever we want.
While we're waiting on him, we can go ahead and talk more about this.
Yeah, the reason I left those off was the Nudura.
The
reason
Nudura.
I left those two off was just like we know that Alabama's already
exactly
them.
exactly.
But I get what you're saying. That what if South Carolina? It was
Had
just change the name with the resume.
Number 11 is what you're saying.
Yeah.
57 strength of schedule.
Okay, 57. What's strength of schedule SMU and
64.
Okay, so that's not that much off. What's Boise State?
I didn't do Boise State.
Okay, what's Alabama?
Alabama is 9.
Wow.
Okay. So now all we're doing, this is tough. You talk about people raising hell. That's hell raising, because what you've done, we're not going to punish you for playing in yet. You've punished 2. You've punished 2 different teams, and you keep punishing the ACC. Jim Phillips has
But
been
you
crying.
love Alabama.
Well, except for 2019 when they bumped them
Yeah.
out, but nobody wants to hear that. It all just goes back to they love Alabama. So, and looks like it this year. But we just did this.
Yeah.
All right, so it's not, we can't blame them. We just did it.
At some point in time, your strength of schedule has to play
Agreed.
maybe even a bigger role than it has played this year.
So, all right, how do we rank these teams? I think even with their strength of schedule, I think you have to put Big 12 championship. Big 12 champion may go. Is there any chance a Big 12 champion? Again, they bounce these champions up, but to be 15 or 16, that's tough.
I don't think they would bounce. They'd go that high.
Now they're going to get the benefit of a seed anyway in
Right,
the bracket.
right.
So, all right, so we got Alabama next. You don't think they'd go? You think it'd be a better above Alabama? I think they would be champion, non-champion. I think they would be. These are champions too, but upset champions. Do you think Alabama's last?
Well, let me ask you
I
this.
think Alabama's ahead of UNLV.
Okay.
But does it matter? Because UNLV
No, it doesn't.
will
But
get
just,
the
he's
fifth
just looking
slot.
at rankings. But yes.
Yeah, we're just looking at, but
Yeah.
yes, but what matters is which of these would be higher, because that team's going, whoever, if it's this one that's higher, this one that's higher is going to
Somebody
get
gets
an
a bye.
automatic bye.
And
Yeah.
they'll be higher.
Yeah. So this will be last, we think.
Yes.
Well, Clemson would get an automatic bye.
Yes, you would think. Yes,
Yeah,
they would be
they-
higher rated than UNLV.
Yeah.
So yes, they would get a bye.
I think Alabama would be ahead of Clemson because Clemson's got 3 losses. Clemson lost to South Carolina.
So
Alabama
they,
beat South
but
Carolina.
Yeah. Okay, so
Alabama beat Georgia. Clemson got beat by Georgia 34-3.
we've made a mess of this. Everybody's just seeing our backs on TV. So let's
Well,
just
look
do
how
this.
good the Nudura holds up.
Look
to
at
all
the-
of
yeah,
them.
that's right.
Exactly. New Dura, it holds up to a hurricane or a thumbtack. So we got
Well,
8 and 9 would be Indiana and Arizona. Nope, let's see. We're doing this just Penn State's number 1.
But you got to figure in your buys on this.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Georgia
So
number
2
2.
would be Georgia. That's down here. Okay. 3 would be Oregon.
Nope,
Nope,
can't
they're
be.
not a
They-
champion.
no.
I'm
Right.
filling in. So next champion is way
you-
down
would you
Big
go to-
12. Big 12, Arizona State's a 3.
Arizona State, Iowa.
We'll just say Arizona State since they're higher ranked right now. And then Clemson would be next they would get a bye.
I'm not so
their
sure
record.
Clemson wouldn't
Be ahead of Arizona State, Iowa State.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't
Let's
matter.
just play
for
it
this
out.
class.
Yeah,
all right.
let's just play it out. All right, so
And then
8,
UNLV would
9,
be the number 12 seed in this.
9, 7, 10, 6, 9, 5, 12. All right, so we got Penn State, we got Georgia, we've got Oregon is next, so they
Oregon
would be the
would be our
5
highest
seed.
ranked.
That's 5.
Notre
6,
Dame 6,
Notre Dame 6,
Ohio State 7,
OSU 7,
Texas 8,
Texas 8.
Tennessee 9.
So Tennessee at
going to
Texas.
Austin.
Tennessee
That's right.
at Texas, and they play the winner of Penn State. Well, they play Penn State. The winner plays Penn
Yeah.
State.
Oh, that wouldn't be bad.
There's your full carryoff scenario.
And you know what? I would rather Tennessee go to Ohio State than Texas.
I agree.
I like Tennessee's chances because of where Ohio State's line is. I know that's a different show.
After losing to Michigan too.
Yeah.
I know everybody thinks they'll be fired up. Tennessee's already done that. In '95, they played a Ohio State team that'd be fired up.
And Tennessee scores first, and everybody starts booing.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for watching. Starting in January, we're going to be doing more of this, and I know what debate show number 1 will be. FCS teams.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching and playing along. We appreciate it. We'll see you back here. We may do a few more of these in December, but certainly we'll see you in January as part of the Sports Source Digital Network. Thanks for watching.